The transmission came from under the Appalachian bedrock, repeating a single word: Yhanthle. It was a whisper from the impossible, a voice from an abyss that should not exist, resonating through untold miles of solid rock and deep, forgotten earth. To understand the profound, stomach-lurching terror this signal invoked, one must first comprehend the delicate, almost arrogant complacency with which humanity perceives its own reality. We chart the oceans, map the stars, and delve deep into the very atoms that compose our world, believing ourselves to be on the precipice of total understanding. Yet, beneath our feet, under the ancient folded mountains of the Appalachians, a forgotten protocol stirred. An unseen communication network began to hum with an alien purpose, destined to unravel the very fabric of our ordered universe. The story of the Whisperer's Wire began not with a bang, but with a faint, almost imperceptible hum on a frequency that shouldn't have been active. It was late autumn, a time when the crisp air over the mountain ranges carries radio waves with an unusual clarity, and amateur operators often find themselves picking up distant, intriguing signals. But this was different. Dr. Alistair Finch, a retired astrophysicist with a passion for radio astronomy and an insatiable curiosity for the anomalous, was scanning the ultra-low frequency ULF band, a realm usually reserved for natural phenomena like lightning strikes, geomagnetic pulsations, or military submarine communication, rarely for anything truly structured. He maintained a small, isolated observation post nestled deep in a secluded valley in western North Carolina, an array of custom-built antennae stretching like skeletal fingers towards the perpetually star-dusted sky. His equipment was sensitive, designed to detect the most delicate whispers from the cosmos, not the grinding echoes from the planetary core. That night, amidst the usual cacophony of atmospheric noise and the distant, almost musical static of deep space, a new sound began to emerge. It was incredibly faint at first, a rhythmic pulse that defied categorization. It wasn't the slow, drawn-out thrum of a natural earth hum, nor the sharp staccato burst of an artificial signal. It possessed a unique, almost biological rhythm, a complex oscillating waveform that suggested intelligence, yet lacked any recognizable pattern of human origin. Alistair, hunched over his oscilloscope, initially dismissed it as an equipment malfunction, a stray harmonic, or perhaps a clandestine military test. But the signal persisted, unwavering, for hours. He logged it, noted its peculiar characteristics: an incredibly stable carrier wave, an unusual modulation that seemed to shift with a subtle, almost imperceptible grace, defying conventional radio physics. The signal seemed to be originating from a point directly beneath his location, deep within the Earth's crust, an impossibility given the known attenuation of radio waves through rock. Over the next few weeks, the signal grew marginally stronger, or perhaps Alistair simply grew more attuned to its presence. He employed advanced signal processing techniques, filtering out the ambient noise, amplifying the elusive transmission. What emerged was less a signal and more a presence. It was a sound that seemed to exist just at the edge of human perception, a metallic resonance combined with a peculiar wet rasping, almost like vast unseen organisms communicating through a medium of incredibly dense fluid. It was unsettling, the kind of sound that makes the hairs on your neck stand on end, not from fear, but from the profound disorientation of hearing something utterly alien. The sound wasn't a language, not in any conventional sense. It was a rhythmic pattern, a series of pulses and elongated tones, punctuated by what Alistair began to describe in his increasingly frantic notes as guttural clicks and sub-vocal sighs. He ran it through every known linguistic analysis algorithm, every statistical model for deciphering unknown communication. All came back blank, or worse, with incomprehensible gibberish that hinted at patterns too complex for human cognition. His initial scientific skepticism began to fray. He brought in colleagues, specialists in geophysics, cryptology, and even xenolinguistics, a highly speculative field to say the least. Each expert, upon encountering the Whisperer's Wire for the first time, exhibited a similar trajectory. Initial disbelief, followed by intense academic curiosity, and finally a profound, almost primal unease. Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant linguist from MIT, spent weeks attempting to parse the intricate modulations. She described the experience as trying to understand a conversation held by deep-sea creatures, where the very act of sound production and reception was fundamentally different from anything terrestrial. "It's not just a language," she'd often murmur, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and fascination. "It's a mode of being translated into sound." The true horror began when the signal, after months of relentless, incomprehensible repetition, subtly shifted. The intricate, rhythmic pulses began to coalesce, to form something approaching discrete units, something that, with aggressive filtering and a speculative leap of faith, could be interpreted as phonemes. It was a painstaking, maddening process, like trying to divine meaning from the static of a dying radio. The initial breakthrough came from a young, eccentric audio engineer, Dr. Ben Carter, who theorized that the signal wasn't just modulating sound, but somehow shaping the very electromagnetic field around it, encoding information not just in frequency and amplitude, but in subtle phase shifts and quantum fluctuations that only his bespoke equipment could detect. He developed a resonating crystal array that, when attuned to the Whisperer's Wire, began to vibrate sympathetically, almost translating the unseen forces into audible wavelengths. It was through this device, in the dead of a moonless night, that the first discernible word manifested. The metallic, wet rasping coalesced, the guttural clicks aligning, and a sound, deep and resonant, seemed to emanate directly from the crystalline array. It repeated over and over, with a horrifying, deliberate slowness. "Yahantle, Yahantle, Yahantle." The sound itself was profoundly unsettling, a word that seemed to scratch at the very edges of human pronunciation, embodying a vast, alien antiquity. The effect on the research team was immediate and devastating. Alistair Finch, a man who had faced the cold indifference of the cosmos with detached academic curiosity for decades, felt a chill that permeated his very bones. Lena Petrova, who had meticulously catalogued obscure languages from forgotten civilizations, went pale, her meticulous notes suddenly seeming utterly irrelevant. Ben Carter, usually brimming with the manic energy of discovery, simply stared at the pulsating crystal, his face drained of colour. Because the word, though alien, was not entirely unknown. It existed within a very specific, very disturbing niche of human consciousness, the realm of cosmic horror, birthed from the dark imagination of H.P. Lovecraft. For those unfamiliar with the unsettling tapestry of Lovecraftian lore, Y'Hantley is not merely a name. It is a profound concept, a key to an entire subterranean and suboceanic civilization of unimaginable age and terrifying power. Lovecraft, a reclusive writer from Providence, Rhode Island, penned a cycle of interconnected tales in the early 20th century, creating what is now known as the Cthulhu mythos. These stories posit a universe utterly indifferent to humanity, populated by ancient, cosmic entities of incomprehensible power and malevolence, often slumbering in forgotten corners of the earth or beyond the stars. Humanity in this cosmology is but a fleeting anomaly, utterly insignificant in the face of these elder beings. Y'Hantley specifically refers to a colossal cyclopean city, a sunken metropolis of non-Euclidean architecture, built by the Deep Ones. The Deep Ones are one of Lovecraft's most iconic creations, hideous, immortal, amphibious humanoids with fish-like heads, bulging eyes, slimy green skin, and webbed hands and feet. They dwell in the abyssal trenches of the world's oceans, far beneath the crushing pressures and perpetual darkness that would annihilate any human. They worship ancient gods far older and more terrible than any deity known to man, Father Dagon and Mother Hydra, entities themselves subservient to the colossal, slumbering cosmic entity Cthulhu, who lies dreaming in his drowned city of R'lyeh. The Deep Ones are not merely monsters, they are the architects of a forgotten, submerged civilization, maintaining terrible pacts with coastal human communities, interbreeding with them to produce grotesque hybrid offspring who slowly transform into Deep Ones themselves over generations, eventually returning to the sea. The most famous instance of this interaction is chronicled in Lovecraft's novella, The Shadow over Innsmouth, where an isolated New England fishing town slowly succumbs to the genetic taint and the horrifying influence of these aquatic horrors. The revelation that the Whisperer's Wire was repeating Y'Hantley from beneath the Appalachian bedrock, hundreds of miles from any ocean, was a direct contradiction of established Lovecraftian geography and, more terrifyingly, of all known geology. Y'Hantley was supposed to be in the Pacific, a sunken city, not a subterranean one. This immediately plunged the research team into a realm of cosmic dread far beyond simple scientific anomaly. It implied that either Lovecraft's fiction was not fiction at all, but a veiled history, or that the entity sending the signal was somehow tapping into a collective human subconscious fear, mimicking its terminology. Neither option offered comfort. The former suggested a reality far more horrifying than imagined. The latter, a malevolent intelligence capable of psychological torment. Alistair Finch, wrestling with the implications, began to revisit his understanding of the Appalachians. These are some of the oldest mountains on Earth, a range that has witnessed unimaginable aeons of geological change. They are riddled with vast, unexplored cave systems, subterranean rivers, and ancient fault lines. Could there be, within this immense geological labyrinth, vast undiscovered oceans? Subterranean seas held captive for millions of years, home to forms of life utterly alien to our surface world. The idea was dismissed as absurd by mainstream geologists, but the Whisperer's Wire pulsed with a chilling insistence, challenging every assumption. The signal was not merely coming from beneath the earth. It was speaking of something beneath the earth, something that existed in the very foundational myths of a particular brand of cosmic terror. The team, now a clandestine group operating under a self-imposed veil of secrecy, fearing ridicule or worse, global panic, intensified their efforts to decode more of the transmission. The single word Yihanthle was just the beginning. The rhythmic pulses, the wet, metallic rasping, the guttural clicks. They continued, and with Ben Carter's resonating crystal array, more distinct patterns began to emerge. The process was agonizingly slow, each new phoneme requiring days of analysis, each potential word a terrifying leap of inference. They learned to disregard human linguistic structures, attempting instead to perceive the deeper mathematical and resonant patterns within the signal, as if the communication was not auditory but vibrational, a form of direct mental impression encoded in electromagnetic waves. The reconstruction aspect was less about translating a conventional language and more about interpreting a vast, complex, multi-layered data stream. Imagine trying to piece together a message not from letters, but from the subtle pressure changes in a deep ocean current, or the intricate growth patterns of a crystalline structure. The sounds they began to derive from the signal were unlike anything ever heard. There were vast, drawn-out tones that seemed to stretch for geological epochs, punctuated by sudden, percussive bursts that resonated with a primal, almost visceral impact. Sometimes a series of short, sharp clicks would be followed by a prolonged, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate directly within the listener's skull, bypassing the ears entirely. It was auditory information, yes, but also emotional, psychological, even spatial. Listening to the reconstructed broadcast was an assault on the senses, a direct interface with an alien mind. After several more months, amidst mounting psychological strain, sleepless nights fueled by strong coffee and a growing dread, they began to discern rudimentary phrases. These were not declarative sentences, but fragments, echoes of concepts alien to human thought. Phrases like, "The great cycle turns," "dreaming awakens," "stars align," "surface sleeps," and "old ones stir" began to manifest. Each new fragment brought with it a fresh wave of existential horror. The implication was clear. This was not merely a random, repeating name. This was a message, a communication, perhaps even a warning or a summons, emanating from an entity that perceived time and reality on a scale incomprehensible to humanity. The recurring themes within the fragmented message revolved around cycles. Cycles of sleep and awakening, of the alignment of celestial bodies, of the rise and fall of civilizations, both human and non-human. The surface sleeps suggested a prolonged period of dormancy, perhaps a time when the deep ones or other similar entities withdrew from overt interaction with the surface world. Dreaming awakens was particularly chilling, echoing Lovecraft's infamous line about Cthulhu sleeping and dreaming in Appalachia. Was this a signal of a coming awakening? A pre-programmed broadcast initiated by a deep-seated mechanism as certain cosmic conditions were met. One of the most unnerving aspects of the decoded messages was their sheer spatial and temporal ambiguity. The signals seemed to speak of places not just in terms of geography, but in terms of dimension. There were hints of vast subterranean oceans, not just within the Earth's crust, but perhaps in parallel dimensions, accessible through certain geological anomalies or forgotten ley lines. The concept of Yihantle from beneath the Appalachians suddenly seemed less of a contradiction and more of a terrifying possibility. Not the original Yihantle, perhaps, but a colony, a sister city, or even a precursor to the Pacific one, established in a time before the continents drifted, or perhaps existing in an overlapping reality. The Appalachians, geologically ancient and deeply fractured, were perfect candidates for such a hidden nexus, a place where the veil between worlds might be thinner, where the deep earth itself could harbour secrets beyond human comprehension. The psychological toll on the team became profound. Alistair Finch, once a beacon of scientific detachment, began to experience vivid, unsettling nightmares of cyclopean cities under impossible pressures, of vast, silent creatures with lamp-like eyes swimming through phosphorescent depths. Lena Petrova developed a nervous twitch and an increasing aversion to natural light, preferring to work in the dim, artificially lit confines of the laboratory, where the Whisperer's wire hummed its incessant alien song. Ben Carter, the most technologically adept, became the most deeply affected. He reported hearing the wire even when his equipment was off, a low, resonant thrumming in the very bones of his skull, a constant, alien presence whispering just beyond the threshold of audibility. They all experienced a growing paranoia, a sense of being observed, scrutinized by an unseen intelligence that permeated the very bedrock around them. The signal was not merely an object of study, it was an intrusive, malevolent presence. The reconstruction often involved not just audio but also visual patterns generated by the resonating crystals, complex fractals and shifting geometric forms that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry. These patterns, when contemplated for too long, induce severe vertigo, nausea, and a profound sense of disorientation. It was as if the very language of the Deep Ones, or whatever entity was broadcasting, was designed to be inherently destabilizing to the human mind, reflecting a reality fundamentally different from our own. Some of the patterns resembled schematics of vast, impossible structures, labyrinthine cities of unknown function, stretching into abyssal depths. Others depicted what could only be described as star charts, but not of any constellations known to modern astronomy, instead showing unfamiliar groupings of stars and nebulae, suggesting immense journeys through intergalactic space or across cosmic epochs. The scale of the intelligence behind the wire began to truly sink in, filling them not just with fear, but with an overwhelming sense of their own utter insignificance. The team hypothesized various purposes for the Whisperer's wire. Was it a distress signal from a trapped entity, isolated for millennia beneath the earth? The tone, however, lacked the urgency of a cry for help. It possessed a deliberate ancient cadence, a slow, patient unfolding. Was it a warning? If so, what was it warning against, and for whom? Or, most chillingly, was it a beacon? A signal designed to awaken something, or to guide something, either from the depths or from the stars, to a specific location on the planet. The fragmented messages about stars aligning and old ones stir certainly leaned towards this terrifying possibility. It suggested a vast pre-planned protocol, initiated perhaps millions of years ago, lying dormant until the opportune moment. The concept of a subterranean Yahantle also opened up disturbing avenues concerning other Lovecraftian entities. The deep ones, while formidable, are typically seen as subservient to greater, more cosmic horrors like Cthulhu. If deep ones could exist beneath the Appalachians, then what other creatures, what other elder entities might also slumber in the unimaginable depths or in realms tangential to our own? Lovecraft's universe is filled with such entities: the Elder Things, the Mygo, Shub-Niggurath, the Black Goat of the Woods with 1,000 young, an entity of monstrous fertility and primeval chaos; Azathoth, the Demon Sultan, blindly churning at the center of ultimate chaos; and Nyarlathotep, the Crawling Chaos, the messenger and soul of the outer gods, who often manipulates humanity for inscrutable purposes. Could the Whisperer's Wire be a prelude to an awakening of these beings? Could this Appalachian Yahantle be a nexus, a gateway, or even a prison for entities far more terrible than mere deep ones? The team also grappled with the implications for humanity's understanding of its own past. If civilizations like Yahantle have existed for eons beneath our feet, what does that say about human history, about our fossil records, our geological timelines? It would mean that vast, epochal events have transpired completely outside of human awareness, that our entire understanding of the Earth's history is tragically incomplete, a mere surface scratch. It suggested that sentient, non-human civilizations might have risen and fallen countless times, existing in realms entirely inaccessible to us, shaping the very planet in ways we cannot comprehend. The Wire was a direct challenge to human exceptionalism, a terrifying reminder that we're not the masters of this planet, merely transient inhabitants. The reconstructed broadcasts, as they grew in clarity and complexity, began to hint at even more disturbing realities. Some sequences seemed to describe intricate rituals, grotesque rites performed in vast echoing caverns, involving strange non-Euclidean geometries and the manipulation of forces utterly unknown to human science. Other patterns suggested immense organic growth, like the pulsing of a gigantic subterranean heart, or the slow, inexorable expansion of an unseen fungal network. The sound itself became more alive, less like a radio signal and more like the respiration of a colossal, dreaming entity. The metallic rasp became a slithering, liquid sound. The guttural clicks transformed into a rhythmic, almost hypnotic chant, and the deep hum morphed into a vast, resonant groan that seemed to emanate from the very core of the planet. It became clear that the Whisperer's Wire was not just a message, but a persistent, almost alive entity in itself, a conduit for something truly ancient and profoundly alien. The general audience, for whom this story would eventually be told, needed to understand the slow, creeping terror, the insidious nature of the horror that seeped into the researchers' lives. It wasn't about jump scares or sudden revelations. It was about the gradual erosion of sanity, the terrifying realization that everything you believed to be true about the universe was a carefully constructed lie. The Appalachians, once seen as serene ancient mountains, now seemed to brood, their deep foundations humming with an unseen, malevolent life. The team began to observe strange correlations. Minor seismic activity in the region seemed to subtly shift the signal's modulation, almost as if the Earth's movements were part of the communication. They also noticed an increase in reports of localized, unexplained phenomena in the surrounding mountain communities. Strange lights in the sky, cattle mutilations with unusual precision, reports of unsettling guttural sounds emanating from deep within the forests at night. These anecdotal accounts, once dismissed as folklore or misidentification, now took on a sinister new context. Were the Deep Ones, or their subterranean kin, beginning to stir on the surface? Were these phenomena related to the broadcast, either as a side effect or as a deliberate precursor to something grander and more terrifying? Dr. Lena Petrova, in a moment of utter desperation and a fragmented attempt to rationalize the incomprehensible, began to theorize about a form of cosmic resonance. Perhaps the signal was not solely electromagnetic, but also gravitic or even psychically resonant, designed to impact the minds of sentient beings exposed to its unique frequencies. This would explain the nightmares, the paranoia, the feeling of being watched. The Whisperer's wire wasn't just transmitting information, it was subtly retuning the human mind, preparing it for a reality it was not meant to comprehend. The knowledge it imparted was a poison, slowly dissolving the structures of human reason. The team knew with a certainty that chilled them to their core that this information could never be publicly released without causing widespread panic and societal collapse. How would the world react to the news that Lovecraft's nightmares were real, that ancient, non-human civilizations existed directly beneath their feet, and that they were beginning to communicate? The implications for religion, science, politics, and humanity's very sense of self would be catastrophic. It would be an existential cataclysm, far more devastating than any war or natural disaster. So they continued their work in secret, bound by the terrible knowledge they had unearthed, slowly succumbing to the creeping horror that the Whisperer's wire so eloquently articulated. The culmination of their research revealed a final, horrifying truth, pieced together from countless hours of maddeningly subtle modulations and nearly incomprehensible rhythms. The Whisperer's wire was not directed at humanity. It was a pre-programmed, automated beacon, a vast, complex, ancient alarm clock. It wasn't meant for us to understand, but simply to exist, to hum its ancient song through the bedrock, awaiting a specific cosmic conjunction, a particular stellar alignment, or a subtle shift in the Earth's deep currents that would signal the time for a greater awakening. The messages they had painstakingly reconstructed: the great cycle turns, dreaming awakens, stars align, were not warnings, but confirmations. Confirmations for them. Confirmations that the ancient pacts would soon be honored, that the long slumber was nearing its end, and that the surface world, currently blissfully ignorant in its fragile sleep, was about to be profoundly, terrifyingly altered. The most disturbing aspect of this realization was the complete indifference of the broadcast. There was no malice, no overt threat, simply the slow, inexorable unfolding of an ancient protocol. It was the sound of a vast, unseen mechanism grinding into motion, oblivious to the ants scurrying on the surface. The entities behind the Whisperer's wire, whether Deep Ones or something far older, perceived humanity not as adversaries, but as an incidental, ephemeral phenomenon, irrelevant to their grand cosmic cycles. We were simply collateral in their awakening, fragile creatures whose brief dominion over the planet was nearing its abrupt and horrifying end. The whisperer's wire continues to hum its ancient song from beneath the Appalachians, a constant, low-frequency thrum that resonates through the very foundations of the earth. It carries its cryptic messages, its fragments of alien lore, its chilling implications of an older, darker world existing just beyond our perception. The researchers who first discovered it are irrevocably changed, haunted by the knowledge they possess, burdened by the terrible truth of cosmic insignificance. They live with the understanding that the transmission came not from a distant star, but from under the bedrock, a signal from a forgotten time and a terrifying future, repeating a single word that shattered humanity's illusion of cosmic isolation. Yhanthle. And in that one word, in that persistent, wet, metallic rasp, in that guttural click from the deepest abysses of our planet, lies the chilling assurance that the dreams of ages are indeed stirring, and soon the surface will know what slumbers in the dark. The broadcast continues, and one can only wonder what new, terrifying fragment of an unthinkably ancient message will emerge next, and what dreadful awakening it heralds for a world still blissfully unaware of the true horrors lying just beneath its feet. The whisper remains, an eternal testament to our profound ignorance and the terrifying reality of the cosmic abyss.